What's up, everyone? Welcome to This Day in Philly Sports History for February 17th, 2023. Let's go right into today's Philly Sports Black History Spotlight. Just a continuation of what we were talking about yesterday. We talked about Joe Frazier versus Jimmy Ellis. Today, we're going to spotlight Joe Frazier. What a lot of people probably don't remember or realize, Joe Frazier was actually born in South Carolina, moved to Philly as a teen to get out of some trouble, some racism and things like that he was experiencing. Started training to be a boxer, gave him discipline and things like that. But he was able to work his way up, won the gold medal in the 1964 Olympics. Had 12 world title fights, went 10-2 in them, won 4 different titles. One time he was the undisputed heavyweight champion. His record throughout his career, and I didn't realize this, that when he retired in the late 70s, early 80s, I forget exactly when, he didn't keep coming back and coming back and coming back like some of the other fighters did. So his record was only 32-4-1 with 27 KOs. But ironically enough, his 4 losses were to Muhammad Ali and George Foreman. They're the only 2 guys that ever beat him. He did have the draw against Floyd Cummings in his last fight, but I think at that point he was kind of done. But just kind of an interesting little fact there that the only 2 guys that ever beat Joe Frazier were George Foreman and Ali. And I know he did beat Ali at one point. I don't think he did ever beat George Foreman. But some things about Joe Frazier I think that a lot of people also don't know. He was a very good dresser. Everybody talks about how flashy and flamboyant Muhammad Ali was. But Joe Frazier was kind of like, I feel like Apollo Creed and Rocky was like a combo of Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali in a sense. But like, he was a very good dresser. He actually was a singer and had released a couple soul albums in the 70s. But what he's most known for and why we're spotlighting him on the Black History Month is because he had his gym that he trained at on North Broad up from Temple Hospital. And basically, he bought it once he had enough money, and he continued to train there. He trained for the Foreman fights, the Ali fights. He trained in that gym, but he bought it. And then after he retired, he worked as a trainer, had a couple Golden Glove boxers come through there. But more importantly, he opened it to kids and gave many kids in Philadelphia, a lot of the underprivileged, minority, inner city kids that wouldn't necessarily have a chance. Like a lot of the people we've been talking about, gave them a chance to really get off the streets, do something productive, and become successful. So a lot of those kids that would come into his gym to after school and things like that would continue on. He would train them, and they would become successful boxers. Obviously, he didn't have anybody that was like heavyweight champion or anything like that come through there, but that wasn't the point. The point was to get kids off the street, give them something productive to do to get them out of trouble. Sadly, he ran into some hard times and had to sell the gym. And it continued to operate as a gym into, I think it was like the early 2000s. I did have the opportunity to go in there at one point when it was still operational to a certain point and see it. I had an internship at Philly 57 back in the day. So I went in there and we did like a little package for it or whatever. But it was pretty cool to be able to step into the ring that Joe Frazier had trained in and that he had worked with and trained those other kids. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to actually meet him. He wasn't in that day. But sadly, after he sold it, it became a furniture store, and now it's just sitting there vacant. It is a historical marker, so hopefully they can do something and maybe even turn it into a Joe Frazier museum. Like I said, I grew up with my dad, who was a huge Ali fan, so for me, like learning about Joe Frazier and just his impact and what he contributed to the city is actually really, really cool. If you want to hear more about his title fight, go back and listen to yesterday's episode if you didn't listen at that point. They do have the statue finally of Joe Frazier down at Xfinity, right outside of Xfinity Live down at the stadium complex. So he's starting to get his due as of a hero legend in Philadelphia. So hopefully that can continue and keep his name alive. But for today, shout out to you, Joe Frazier, for not only your contributions in the boxing world, but what you've given back to the city of Philadelphia over the years. All right, so getting into some more of what we usually talk about. I completely missed this yesterday when we were talking about the Sixers. I think I was more upset that they almost blew that lead. But congrats to Joel Embiid, who actually did score, cross the 10,000 point mark the other night. One of the quickest to do that, which is pretty cool, especially the way his career had started out with the injuries and everything. So shout out to Joe. Eagles update, not really much. Like I said, we're trying to turn the page. If you need a little bit of help with that, I did drop the new Back to the Future last night, where we kind of put a bow, have our morning circle, I guess you could call it, or situation, or whatever, but kind of help get over the pain of the Super Bowl. We talk about some of the other painful losses and basically just dive headfirst into the pain. So go give that a check. If you haven't, Back to the Future with a PH, wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. Flyers lost 6-2 to the Kraken. Again, this is what we should expect from this team. They're going to play well and play well against teams sometimes that are more evenly matched with them. They sometimes don't do so well against the teams that are much better. But the coach said this is what to expect, so this was the typical what we should expect of the Flyers this year. A couple Phillies updates. It's kind of nice to get back into there. And the Eagles actually took us from the end of the Philly season, literally to the start of a new season. Schwarber was interviewed yesterday, and it was actually pretty cool to hear. I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically said they're coming in, they're pissed off. It's like a different vibe in camp so far, and a lot of those guys are early. Right now, it's only required for pitchers and catchers, but a lot of those guys are in. And Schwarber said, it's a different vibe because we're disappointed in how the season turned out last year, but we also are like, you know what? We're confident going in. They did extend Sir Anthony Dominguez, so that bullpen should be a strength this year for the Phillies. Some sad news, Tim McCarver passed away. He had 2 stints with the Phillies. And basically he was Steve Carlton's catcher. He played with him in St. Louis, got traded over in the first place. He also was traded with Dick Allen. We talked about him earlier this month on this podcast. So some sad news, and one of my favorite Tim McCarver memories, I don't even know if it's appropriate right now, but it was when Deion Sanders dumped the bucket of water on him when the Braves were celebrating one of their division wins, and he was just chasing after him saying, "You're a real man, Deion." So check that out on YouTube. But today we're going back to 1971. So February 17th, 1971, Villanova, who just fell out of the rankings, beat Canisius 82-59 down at the Palestra. Future NBA players Howard Porter and Chris Ford led the way for the Wildcats. Chris Ford, you might remember him. He was an interim coach and an assistant coach for the Sixers back in the 2000s. At this point, the Wildcats were questionable to make the tournament. At that time, there's only 25 teams in the tournament, but this win against Canisius sparked a 9-game winning streak. They would go into the tournament, beat St. Joe's, Fordham, Penn, and Western Kentucky. They make it to the Final Four, actually the final game, before they lost to UCLA, who ended up winning the championship. Howard Porter was the most outstanding player of the tournament. However, this run, as well as that award for Porter, was taken away because he had signed a contract to play in the ABA with the Pittsburgh Condors before the season was over, which is a big no-no. But for all intents and purposes, Villanova went to the finals in 1971 before losing to UCLA. But this win on this day in 1971 against Canisius sort of catapulted them on that run to go. Phillies are back, baby. Hopefully that'll help take some of the sting out of the Super Bowl. Be sure to check out Back to the Future. Shout out to Joe Frazier for his contributions to the city of Philadelphia. Congrats to Joe on 10,000 points. Let's go have a weekend. And until next time, I'll see you when I see you.